everyone, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I am doing an annual topic, and that is the Bookish Academy Awards. I figured with this year, with the Academy disappointing me wholeheartedly with most of its nominations, I thought, hey, let's do the bookish version, and at least I can right their wrongs personally by chatting through some of my favorite books. But if you're not familiar with this tag, I'll have the original creator down below, but it's essentially repurposing all of the Academy Awards categories and turning them into bookish questions, and I'm gonna provide book selections from all the books I read from 2019, so it's kind of a reflective award ceremony to some of my favorite reads from last year. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So the first two categories is Best Actor and Actress, so I'm obviously gonna pick my favorite male protagonist and favorite female protagonist from the books I read last year. Starting with my favorite male protagonist, I'm gonna go with Locke Lamora from the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. Locke Lamora is just a character that you just live to root for. He's cunning and clever, and he's gonna outsmart you on every turn. Absolute rogue, but so unbelievably lovable, and it's because of him and his friends that you absolutely fall in love with this series in itself. This is a book series where you're following a group of people essentially outsmarting the rich and stealing all their money for the sake of stealing it. It's so much fun. It's a daring tale of just mischief, and I love it. And Locke Lamora is just someone who constantly outsmarts me, and there's something about a plot device of constantly being tricked that I'm always here for. I don't know, I just love having the wool pulled over my eyes and being like, oh my gosh, I did not see that coming. And Locke Lamora is a character that is constantly pulling the wool over my eyes, and I just love him, and I can't wait to read the third book in this series. Really enjoyed the first two books last year. Locke is definitely my favorite main character that I encountered. Moving on to my favorite female protagonist, I'm gonna go with Vasya from the Bear and the Nightingale series. This is just one of my all-time favorite trilogies, and similar to Locke, you kind of get to witness Vasya from childhood to adulthood. You're truly following her whole life, watching her grow up in her small village to basically taking on all of the magic across Russia. You see her with her family, you see her overcome all of her own personal struggles as well as like societal struggles. You're rooting for her from page one, and you can't help but fall in love with her. She's such a capable main character that you really get to see like take on everything from being a small child to being an adult female in this historical Russia setting. In so many ways, Vasya as our main character is the reason why I love this series so much. Yes, the historical setting is rich and the writing is beautiful, but Catherine Arden has like artfully crafted a female main character to truly root for, and is one that is just so relatable and interesting and inspiring in every way, shape, and form. I love Vasya so much, and I love this series so much, so I feel like I've like always nonstop talking about this, but yes, Vasya, favorite female protagonist for sure of 2019. So the next category is Best Cinematography, and this has been turned into Best Plot Twist. I definitely think this is a tricky category because it can be kind of spoilery depending on how you answer it. So I'm kind of going with a safe answer and going with a murder mystery, because the assumption is with this genre there's always going to be a plot twist, and it's just a matter if it's well done or not. So I've picked the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This is a truly classic whodunit style story, and we basically are following a main character who's trapped in this house, and he has to solve the mystery of who's killing Evelyn Hardcastle, and he has to do this through living in different people's bodies throughout the same day over and over again. So he's gaining all these different perspectives and viewpoints, try to piece this mystery together. It's absolutely riveting. I loved it so much. It's a book that's really puts you on the edge of your seat, and from a murder mystery perspective, the reveal is very satisfying. I did not see it coming, despite me trying to figure it out the whole time while reading it. So I just think this is like exceptionally well crafted and really clever, and in my opinion just will definitely surprise you ultimately in the end. It's so good and very satisfying. So this definitely wins Best Cinematography. Plus it has this like classic setting, like it's kind of a historical fiction, this old manor home, and it's just full of all these different society people with all of their secrets packed away in their trunks, and you just want to figure out what's going on and who done it. You know what I mean? So yeah, Best Cinematography, 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Next up is Best Costume Design. I'm not gonna lie, this one was a little tricky. I tried to pick one book per category to kind of have like a huge range of books to talk about, and one of the books I have for a different category I would probably also give this award, so I had to give it to like a second placer. That being said, I selected Ninth House for best costume design or best cover, which don't get me wrong, I really like this cover. I think it's dark, I think it's menacing, I think it does the job, I think it's really eye-catching, I like the bold typography, and I also think it really speaks to the dark nature of this book as well, kind of the menacing mystery that's kind of slithering through it, if you will. But yeah, I like this. I think it's, you know, it definitely would catch my eye if I was in a bookstore, even if I didn't know who Leigh Bardugo was, and this kind of dark academia magic murder mystery story was also a great book as well. So beautiful cover speaks to how beautiful it is on the inside as well, because it's also a great book. Next category is best supporting actor or actress, which is essentially the best side character in a book. And I have to pick just with my heart on this one, and I'm going with Keith. I think his name is actually Keith, but I've called him Keefy my whole reading experience, so it's just that's his name now. I love him in the Keeper of the Lost City series. This is a middle grade fantasy series following a multitude of main characters. Our main character, Sophie, in the first one basically discovers that she's an elf and she's magical and she's transported to this new magical world, and her friends essentially have to save the day. And there's one particular character that just grows on you. He's just so adorable. He's just like such a good friend to Sophie, and they're so cute together. I think they really show like a healthy emotional friendship of like sharing how you feel, talking about difficult topics, and like being there for each other from a friendship perspective. He's so adorable and I love them together, and he's by far and away my favorite side character in this series. So much better than Fitz, don't even get me started. But yeah, I'm definitely team Keith for life, definitely. There's no other selection in my opinion. But yeah, this is also such a fun middle grade fantasy series. If you're into that genre, highly recommend checking this out because it's so good. Next up is Best Original Screenplay, which is Most Unique World or Plot. For this, I'm selecting The Missing of Claire de Lune, which would also technically win Best Cover Design because I love these illustrated covers. They're in this beautiful pastel. I love them. But I had to also give this series Best Plot and Most Original World because I honestly have never encountered anything like this before. Essentially, this is a YA fantasy novel set on different spires floating in the sky, and the origins of the spires themselves are a mystery, but you do know some sort of catastrophic event kind of broke up whatever world existed previously, and now spires exist. And within each of these spires is like a different political system, like social structure, all of that. Each one is very unique, and all of this originates from an ancestral spirit. It's essentially inspired by different religious and political things from our own history. For example, our main character's ancestral spirit is Artemis, but you'll find references to different religions, spiritual beliefs, and all of that all kind of culminating together in one really interesting mishmash in this book. Because of that, I'm just like so entranced by the setting of this world, not to mention there's different magic that exists on different spires, like different everything. So there's like so much to encounter and learn, and a lot of it's dark and mysterious, but sometimes it's like beautiful and friendly. Like it just depends where you are, depends like what you're encountering, and I love it all. And I would say the world is probably my most favorite thing about this series because it's just so fresh and original. It's great. Next category is Best Adapted Screenplay, and this is essentially Best Book to Movie Adaptation. I'm not gonna lie to you, I've only read one book to movie adaptation last year, but luckily it was one I really enjoyed. And that was Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I actually read the entire trilogy this past year and it was so entertaining. It was definitely like a highly dramatic, rich, luxe, hyper-focused view on just people that are just so beyond any life I could even imagine living. Basically, it follows our main character, Rachel, who's had this boyfriend, they live in New York, they're in love, and he invites her back to his family home in Singapore. She goes, she visits, she thinks it's just gonna be a normal family visit, and then she discovers that he's actually super rich, like billionaire. All of his friends, all of his family, not only incredibly rich, but also super influential in Singapore and beyond, and she kind of finds herself in the middle of all of this family drama, and books 2 and 3 kind of really expand on that family drama. It's so ridiculous, but so addicting at the same time. I mean, the types of things these people do is just riveting. You cannot put it down. And the movie, which I also watched last year, was beautiful. I loved all the acting, the fashion, and I thought it was a really good adaptation of this book. And I think they're making the rest of the series into movies as well, so I'm definitely gonna check those out. So yeah, I would honestly recommend this series, but also watching the movie. It was really good and so entertaining. Honestly, I feel like it was one of my favorite kind of rom-coms of last year. This category is Best Animated Feature. This is essentially a book that you read that you think would be wonderfully adapted into some sort of animated film or movie or TV show or what have you. And for this, I'm picking Wicked Fox for a multitude of reasons. One, I think it would be an exceptional anime. But two, this book was actually, when the author was writing it, she was deeply inspired by K-drama, so I also think it would make a great K-drama. Obviously not animated, but this is a series that is super highly dramatic and lots of wild things happen, which I think would just like naturally make it well suited for an anime, because honestly, let's be real, animes are great because they are just like non-stop plot moving, and this is a book that definitely does that. This is a story that's inspired by Korean folklore, and it's a fantasy novel that basically follows our main character, half nine-tailed fox, who has to survive consuming human energy and also half human. And she basically falls in love with a boy at her school, even though she knows she's not supposed to. And it's kind of this reverse vampire trope kind of thing, because usually the boy is the vampire and the girl's the one that falls in love. So it kind of spins that on its head. It's full of really interesting magical inspiration. It's definitely historically influenced and pulling from a lot of Korean references. I also feel like there's so many visual components to this book, lots of reference to seasons, and I honestly just feel like because of how the story kind of unwinds, it would make an amazing anime or animated movie. So definitely stand by this selection. Also, if you haven't read this, so entertaining. I read it in like one day. Next selection is Best Director, which is a writer that you discovered for the first time this past year. And for me, this also just means Best Writer I read last year. And for this, I'm going with N.K. Jemisin, who of course wrote the Broken Earth trilogy, which is a trilogy I have not stopped talking about since I've read it, because it is honestly one of the most wonderfully constructed and written things I have ever read, simply put. And obviously she's won like all the awards for this series, so I'm not the only one who thinks this. But this is just truly one of the most original, heart-wrenching, heartbreaking fantasy series I've really ever encountered. And like literally if you read the back of them, it's like astounding NPR. These novels are a gift to the whole of our culture. The Guardian, brilliant, Washington Post. I'm not kidding. Like, these books are incredibly lauded, and rightfully so. But this is essentially a fantasy that's set in a world where the Earth is almost like a character in itself. The Earth is constantly like ending due to catastrophe, in that it has these terrible earthquakes that can basically bring the end to civilization, you know, change the atmospheric pressure, change the climate, and, you know, bring end to humanity at large over and over and over again. So as a way to cope with this, humanity has basically become very survivalist oriented. Communities are built with certain amounts of people, and they all have very prescriptive roles. Some of them become more important when there is a catastrophe at hand. Some of them are kicked out depending on kind of where they fit. In this world, there's also people who can kind of control the Earth's power, and instead of being lauded as possible saviors, they're instead incredibly like ostracized and controlled and treated terribly. In this series, we follow multiple different perspectives: a young girl who's first encountering her powers, a person who is, you know, been using her powers for a while and works directly with like the largest government civilization on this world, and also a mother who's on a quest to find her daughter. This is a fantasy series that really touches on like every subject you can think of: sexuality, identity, race, humanity, motherhood, like everything. And it does so with such poignancy, and it's exceptional, and one of the best things I've ever read, and obviously winning the award for Best Director, because truly the writing is just next level. And some of the things she does with writing, I don't want to say, but when you read it, you'll know what I mean, and it's just, it's the best. Right, next category is Best Visual Effects, which is Best Combat in Books, and I'm gonna go with Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. I would also definitely give this to the first book in this series, which is Skyward. This is essentially a YA science fiction series that follows our main character Spensa, who is a space pilot. You're often following her within pilot school or in the sequel on another planet, but kind of still in pilot school. And the reason why I'm giving it this award is because there's so much space combat, and I feel like Brandon Sanderson, I don't know, maybe learn how to fight in space, because his writing about it is so meticulous and captivating. Like, you can really visualize everything that's going on. I feel like sometimes combat, especially spaceship combat, can feel very chaotic, hard to follow, and I just feel Brandon Sanderson has done such an exceptional job kind of setting up the rules of how it works and making you be able to follow everything as if you're like watching a movie in your head. So therefore, I just truly think one of the strongest strengths of this series is the combat and how well Brandon Sanderson is able to craft these star-set combat scenarios. And actually in the first one, there's a bunch of diagrams of how the combat works, so you become very familiar with it in the first one, and then obviously encounter it again in the sequel. It's just honestly my favorite part. Like, his writing and being able to describe the, you know, functions of this world is so well done. And it's also just like a really highly entertaining YA science fiction story following our main character Spencer, who wants to be a pilot, becomes a pilot, and is a really good pilot. And then, you know, there's some AI technology, a sassy spaceship, some sort of like lost magical science fiction stuff going on, and a bunch of mystery that our main character Spencer has to kind of uncover. It's great, but also great space combat. And the last two books kind of win by default, but luckily they're also exceptional. So still definitely things I would recommend. But the next one is Best Standalone. I don't think, I probably read 5 or 6, maybe 5 standalone books all of last year. So the pool in which to pick from, small. But the ones that I had to select from, very good. I decided to go with Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. Celeste Ng is by far one of my favorite authors. I feel like she really captures this feeling of nostalgia combined with kind of American suburbia and these like really entertaining family plots, kind of like what's hiding behind the white picket fence. I loved her first novel, Everything I Never Told You, and this book was also very exceptional, and it's gonna be turned into a Hulu show, which I'm really pumped to watch. But this is set in Shaker Heights, Ohio, this really pristine yet artistic, like, neighborhood. We follow one of our main characters, Elena Richardson, who's kind of like the pinnacle of this society. Her family is beautiful. Both her and her husband are very successful. They live in this beautiful, gorgeous home that's super well kept. And down the street from their home, they also have this rental property that they rent out to people that they feel like would add value to the neighborhood or, you know, the town at large. At the beginning of the story, though, this novel opens with Elena Richardson's house burning down to the ground. And you're kind of, from there, kind of back into how in the world did this happen? What caused, you know, at the end of one summer to have a woman's house be burned down to the ground. We also follow another family who moves into Elena Richardson's rental home, Mia Warren. She is an artist and she moves in with her daughter, and their families become very intertwined, and you kind of follow all the different characters from both of these families and begin to see the little sparks, perhaps the little fires that might be the ultimate cause to this big fire at the beginning of the story. It's absolutely fascinating. I just feel like Celeste Ng has such a handle on like people, you know? But yeah, this book was great, and I can't wait for another book by her to come out because I will read it right away. And the last category is Best Documentary, and this is Best Historical Fiction or Novella that you read last year. For this, I'm picking The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I've obviously talked a lot about this book on my channel. And this is basically a fake autobiography or biography, and we follow our main character, who's this elusive, very famous old Hollywood starlet who was notoriously married 7 times in her life. And essentially near the tail end of her life, she's decided to sit down with kind of a no-name writer to spill her entire life story. And you're kind of following her story through the organization of each of her husbands. Like, each husband is a different chapter and part of her life. This is a story that has a lot of glamour, a lot of mystique. Evelyn Hugo as a main character is just captivating. She feels so real and so tangible. But on the flip side of that, you also are kind of facing a Hollywood that is definitely kind of like, while beautiful and glittery, is very dark and gross kind of underneath. A lot of LGBTQ plus themes, because our main character Evelyn Hugo is actually bisexual, and that is definitely a huge topic of this novel. It's a beautiful story, it's heartbreaking, and it's just one that's gonna captivate you. And I really loved the old Hollywood setting with this book kind of jumping between different decades, but you really do feel like a lot of it's set in like the 50s and 60s and 70s, which is a really interesting time period. But I would say this has to be my pick for Best Historical Fiction, but also I did not read a lot of historical fiction last year. I really read like almost all fantasy. So this year, 2020, trying to read a little bit more historical fiction, because it is a genre I love very much. Alrighty guys, that is the Bookish Academy Awards. Let me know down below some selections you would make on whatever category you want to, as I would love to see your selections, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!